working with for AI. And we'll examine what abundance and what the other side, dystopia, means in practice, who gains or loses under each path, and how ZK can act as a steering control as AI is becoming more integrated into our daily lives. So as a first question, I'm wondering if we can go around and have everyone introduce themselves and just give some context on the projects that you're working on.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Jan, and I'm a co-founder at Zircuit. And Zircuit is a zero-knowledge rollup on Ethereum where we use AI to filter malicious transactions from the chain.
Hey, I'm Coby. I'm the head of program strategy at O1 Labs. And we build the Mina protocol and the zero-knowledge SDK called O1JS, where you can use zero-knowledge proofs. And working on some other stuff too, but mostly in the zero-knowledge space.
Hi everyone, I'm Norbert from ZkCloud. I'm head of product we are building a universal proving layer. Our bread and butter is ZK proof generation, and we've been working with a bunch of L2s in the space and different other projects, also heavily involved in the ETH Proofs initiative to support Ethereum's journey from re-execution to snark verification. And a pleasure to be here.
Hey, so I'm Geoff, head of community at Ontology. We're Layer 1 blockchain with EVM compatibility. We work with decentralized identity for the last 8 years, nearly now, but also decentralized reputation, and looking at how ZK proofs and identity fit in nicely with AI and how that moves forward.
Right, thank you. So starting for this panel, I'm wondering if we can first define what AI abundance and AI dystopia means. So I'm very curious to hear from each of the panelists what it means for you and any kinds of societal risks that push us towards one end of the spectrum, which is dystopia, a future, an unideal future of control, centralized control, and centralized power, and also any opportunities for the other end of the spectrum where we can enable for AI abundance. So curious to hear from all the speakers what AI dystopia and AI abundance means for each of you.
All right, for me, dystopia is the easy one. It's almost literally the Terminator movies where, we have these robots in control of everything. And I think that's the extreme, unrealistic scenario that we're probably never going to get to. But there's a place between here and there where actually we just have a few centralized entities with all this AI data, using it to sort of push us into places where we don't want to be as sort of individuals, and some small set of people controlling all the power. And that may not be like overtly violent like in the Terminator movies, but I think it's still very scary. And abundance is sort of the opposite of that, where we have actually access to all that information we were promised with sort of the internet coming online, and able to use it because now we can also intelligently act on it. Sort of like the Star Trek world where the captain will just say, "Oh, computer, do this," and they can do it, and it just works, and there's none of this weirdness. So I think those are the extremes that I like to see, and I'll pass for the definition, and then you had some questions of what could push us there.
Cool. Yeah. I think that for me, even louder. Okay. For me, the abundance is almost the easier one. So there is, I think currently, like the way Web 2 is developed and sort of the start of Web 3, we have the big tech centralized powers. And they're optimizing for profit and for convenience of a few customers, globally speaking, a few people. And AI abundance for me is really, how do we use AI and this new technology that's really good at solving problems and align the problem with the needs of the global many, and actually solving the human needs rather than human wants, and delivering that value to as many people as possible. So yeah, and then dystopia for me is like, one guy has all the power, all the money, and is optimizing for his own personal satisfaction, and everyone else is like inputs to the system.
Yeah, so I think anybody who's been paying attention probably realizes that we have data dystopia already occurring in societies, right? And AI just makes that even worse. Because if you go back to Cambridge Analytica, anybody who knows the Cambridge Analytica story, all this data on social media, Facebook and so on, That data gets used to then direct people in certain directions, direct people's preferences, and actually have influences on things as large as national elections and presidencies and prime ministerships and things like this. The idea that we just give more and more data in an uncontrolled way to AI, and so much access to it, but also more rapid processing, easier use into different logarithmic actions. I think there's a very real, almost hidden impact to AIs on this, whereby if we continue down the track of centralized data control and keep giving more and more data, because that's what makes AIs useful, what we actually see is more opportunities for people to use that big data in ways for control and pushing populations to where they want them to be.
Yeah. From my side, I'd say dystopia is something where people have less autonomy and fewer opportunities by negatively the wrong implementations of AI into our lives, and then abundance would be something like increased human capabilities, much more optimized workflows, much better public goods, fair distribution of all these secure and private AI models being implemented in different parts of our lives, and protecting people and not using them as products, or not using them as something that can be sold, like data and all the information about the people. So I think one of the core things for me is, for example, if all these models have all the data of us, for example, I don't know, all our locations, all our search results, whatever, all our prompts, then actually we can be along the interest of certain parties controlling that model. We could be actually driven into some kind of situations, or into a future which is really, really not beneficial. And I do agree with Julian. We've seen a lot of movies, and I think maybe I don't want to go that extreme, but I think there may be more truth. If this is not dealt with properly, and we don't have verifiable AI, and we don't have decentralization around all this, I think maybe more of that can come true than we would think. But I think content authenticity, I just want to mention this particularly. I think this is a key element, because it can completely mess up our notion of reality. If we live online, we see content and we don't know whether that's true or not. It's simply messing up our notion of reality and notion of truth, and it deteriorates trust among the people in the system, in the governments, and it's just so destructive that I don't think we want to get there. So yeah.
Thank you all for all your very strong points. Jan, you mentioned that, I like the point that you mentioned that the original roots of our web was for us to have equal access to all the information on the internet, and that was the original promise that we were given, and we really want to strive towards that. Coby, you mentioned that our goal here is to try to capture the needs of the majority of the people, not just say the few centralized players. And Geoff, you mentioned as well that we're unfortunately beginning to, or we have already been seeing a lot of the dystopian elements. You mentioned a few major scandals like the Facebook Cambridge Analytica one, and our goal here is to try to steer the way towards that. And Norbert, even you mentioned, for example, with the privacy and the authenticity components, how those must be present within the abundant future. And just on top of that, going off on the content authenticity aspect, I'm wondering if our goal here is abundance. We must have some sort of guardrails, some sort of checks to help with, say, components like content authenticity. I'm curious to hear what the role is for verifiable AI in this abundant future. Are there any other kinds of particular tools, like, for example, all of you guys are part of the ZkCloud projects, that can help us enable to achieve this idea of larger scale verifiability, especially when we're looking towards an abundant AI age?
I think the important part about verifying AI is to make sure that people really can't just say they're using something against you, or you're classified in some way, or some actions are taken because they just say it's so, and there's no sort of argument you can have for it. But if you can establish a sort of a network of well-defined rules for verifying that actually the AI was doing something with a good data set, which is also very important, I think something's overlooked quite a bit, then it's going to be a little bit better because you can trust that outcome a lot more. You can say, okay, this is actually maybe true because of some real reasons, or really do have some health concerns or something. Whatever the AI is trying to do for you, that isn't easily manipulatable for short-term goals of particular individuals or corporations. And I think that's something that is a very nice thing. And I think abundance will need that. And I think it'll be very hard for people who currently can influence these models, either by core training or by keeping the sort of execution closed and verifiable, to give up that power. So I think that will be really challenging. I don't know if I answered the question. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was really happy to see this question on the panel because this is something that we're actually thinking a lot about at Mina. We released a demo this week called TouchGrass, where we allow users to take verifiable photos with their phone and save them on Mina. But we've been thinking about this content authenticity problem. I think, I agree with Norbert that you need to be able to identify authentic human-generated content versus AI content. But I think that it also depends on the context, because there's two different kinds of value you can have with content. Something like a pretty picture, or something that just makes you happy, or pretends to make you happy, whatever. That has like a kind of direct value, and if it's AI generated, I think of the stake in the matrix. Like, do you even really care? But there's this whole marketplace of content that's like referential content, so reviews and travel vlogs and like things that you want to share with people about the real world. And if it's not real, then it totally falls apart. And we're in this inflection point right now where there's this industry of influencers, and the whole job of the influencer is to get people to buy stuff, to convince them about things. And it became a big industry because people trust other people. We're like 10 days away from no one trusting anything they see online anymore, if we're not there already. And that value of that content is going to basically go to zero as people go from assuming everything they see is human-generated and real, to assuming, if it's not proven otherwise, that it's AI-generated. So I think that basically in the future we're going to have sensors that sign everything that they record, we're going to have proofs about those, and they're all going to be composable. And networks will have to be built from the ground up to be verifiable. And I think it's even compatible with like existing distribution networks like Twitter and Meta, if they care to participate. But really, you can't have like a opt-in verifiable system. It needs to be an opt-out where you can upload AI stuff, but it's assumed to be AI on this proven purpose.
Yeah, I think I do agree with you. For example, on the content side, there are things that have not that big of an impact if it's AI generated or human generated, but I think verifiability for being able to see what, like you mentioned, photos. I think there are some cameras by Leica and also Sony which have a cryptographic signature there. So I think this is something that we would need in general for AI models, where there is kind of like a signature for an inference or a signature for an output, where you have information on what model it was, like a timestamp even. And then if there are data leaks, if there are, things become traceable, things can be maybe rolled back, users can be maybe educated on these things happening and can move to other more secure models. I think it's just super important, and I agree a lot with Jan, like why would these centralized entities give up all the power that they have now? I think we as users of these models have a big say in that, even though it may take a little longer. I think having verifiable alternatives, even if it's less performant, and educating people why it's better for them to use those and why it's safer for them to use those, I think it could, at the end of the day, pay off really well for the overall benefit of our human lives.
I think this is really, really hard, right? So authentic and true are not the same. right? We can have authentically produced things that are just simply not true. They can be human produced, they can be AI produced. It doesn't make them any more true if a human does it than an AI does it. Trump is about to sue the BBC in the UK apparently because they produced content that simply was not true. You don't need AI to do that. People are very good at doing it and have been doing it for decades and decades. I think, whilst I think it's important to be able to understand whether content has been produced by people or whether it's AI generated, I actually think as we move through time, that'll be even more difficult to answer because so much content will be a combination of those things. There'll be a combination of how that's done. I think what's really important is how do we measure the reputation of how these agents have performed or how people have performed, how our users have performed. Just last week, there was a big news report about how the UK were approaching stablecoins. Every single report I saw on Twitter was incorrect. I went to ChatGPT, I asked ChatGPT, ChatGPT just took all that data and gave me the wrong answer. All of it was wrong because everything was done from a secondary source. Nothing was done from the primary source, the primary report. So I think it's really important that when we start thinking about how AIs are doing things, not just tagging that data, but understanding if it's a primary source data, if it's secondary source data, how reliable that data is, and then measuring, is your agent, is your AI using primary sources or secondary sources? How often does it get it wrong? How often in hindsight do you look back and go, well, that was rubbish, that was nothing like the truth. And we have to be able to measure that because that's where trust will eventually come from. Not just in authenticity, but in understanding how right or how wrong these models get it over time.
So I like the role of reputation here, but I also think that we need to really make sure that the original data that a lot of the AI is using is attestable or accurate. Because reputation is a reactionary system, right? It might already have done the damage, and you could prove that someone had propaganda for years, but if it was effective, it's too late. You're going to sit on your high horse in a dystopian world, it's going to be over. So you need to do more, and I'm not saying we shouldn't have reputation systems, I think there's a place, but attesting to data in primary sources like you're talking, I think is much more valuable and something that people aren't building out right now because it's very hard to scratch away at those positions of power. It's very easy to give a company a bad reputation, but they still have the power of wait, Google sucks, but I like their phones. Oh well, what am I gonna do, right? And it's not just Google, it's all of them or none of them, depending on what you think. So I'm not trying to pick on any particular one.
No, I think that's really important because you have to have good data in that, right? You have to have and be able to attest to that data being true and so on. However, at the same time, people can take the same data and come up with very different conclusions and very different things that might be serving a different purpose to what you actually, that data would show. And we see this all the time. So yes, I agree. First and foremost, you have to attest that data. But over time, you have to see the intentions of what that data has been used for as well.
I think that you're referencing the truth as if it's something that we can measure at a grand level. We can say, oh, this model tells the truth and this model doesn't. I think what we can hope to do is know facts that are actually true at the ground level. But as soon as we start making inferences about these facts, I think the concept of truth is kind of out the door. And basically, the only thing that you can hope to do is optimize for an outcome that is good, whether it's true or not. And I think when you said about humans producing untrue stuff, and we can already do that, anything that a human can do, the AI can do like a million times more intensely. So when we make mistakes as humans, it's not so bad. We can walk it back. The next person will come along and make a different mistake. It takes us in a slightly different vector. But if you put an AI and it makes the same mistake and you put $1 trillion behind it, it just goes like in a straight line down the wrong path. And that's, I think, really worrying. So from like transitioning from human to machine, it's like the intensity and the size of the vectors become really scary. Where if you go down the wrong path, all of a sudden everything's over, like you said, and then you're on your high horse. Well, I wish we hadn't done that.
Definitely agree with all these points here, especially Geoff, what you mentioned that we don't just want to attest the primary sources, but we also wanted to, with the risk that are relating to some misinterpretations from different people, even if the primary sources or even the secondary sources, everything in that chain is attested to, we're still running into risks of, say, people interpreting it in different ways which is okay because everyone has their own different viewpoints, but having that, having like a grand sort of truth is, as I mentioned as well, Coby, a bit hard to achieve. So hopefully we can have a future where we're able to attest to as many different sources as possible, and maybe that's the closest that we can get as of right now for this idea of authenticity. And just going off of that, especially what you mentioned, Coby, about where you see a future where we'll have these composable proofs be generated across, say, different content and other types of data that needs to be verified. I'm curious to hear how we can prevent a future where we say have the monopolization of compute, where only those with the most amount of resources are able to generate these proofs. Will we run into any kinds of risks with centralization there? And if so, how can we go about eliminating these risks?
Sure. I don't know exactly what the risks are, but I imagine they exist, and I think the easiest answer is to keep doing the sort of deep technical work that a lot of people in this room and others are doing to make it so that you can verify all this stuff on your phone or on a laptop, or something that is reasonably accessible to the average consumer or individual or small company. That's what it needs to be. So I would say keep doing better math.
Yeah, something that Lee said in the opening keynote was that there's like this East versus West model. I think we can actually be the beneficiaries of this, where I think our models are being open sourced because we're trying to capture attention and mind share. So like the rest of the world can basically keep up with cutting edge research, and then we can build things on our own and take back control. Really, I think it's a classic problem of democracy type of thinking. If people are apathetic, they will cede control of their lives to people who work for them. But if we all are working together, building open source software and making it better, then we have a fighting chance.
So I think it's interesting. You speak about compute, and we see all these mind-bending numbers, right? From Elon Musk raising billions upon billions to get the compute right. Sam doing the same thing. And then at the same time, we're trying to compete with, deepin, have you like GPU doing these things. And I find that quite scary because the numbers being spoken about by the people in control of this at the moment are just eye-watering and huge. And so competing is really hard. However, that said, I think most of the useful stuff we're going to produce will not be a 10 million GPU build. It'll be smaller models with our data, hopefully safely stored, doing things that are useful to us. And I think that is where the Web3 solutions, with people providing their GPU power, with people providing, whether it be open source or not, or providing good user experiences with good privacy, I think that will really come to the front over the coming years as that becomes more important to people, because those personalized models, those personalized agents, I think is where AI is really going to shine in the future.
I think you are making a really good point, because currently, basically, we are using huge models for everything, and I'd expect that as we start going toward more application-specific use cases of AI and like targeting specific areas of our actual real lives, I think these smaller models could have much more weight in the competition, so to say. And some other thing that just came to my mind, we could have, for these smaller models, it's much easier to enforce a couple of standards. Like you could have model cards where you say, okay, this model has been trained on this data set and we can prove it. I mean, we don't need to reveal the data set, but we can prove it didn't include sensitive data. We can prove properties of the model. It doesn't have a backdoor, for example, or it doesn't have, gatekeepers, or it has a decentralized governance over upgrades related to the model, or whatever. And I think probably this is a more niche type of use case, but I'm quite bullish on these smaller models and they taking larger and larger roles in our lives versus these huge ones that are just super convenient to be used, but actually might do quite a bit of harm as well.
absolutely agree with all the points mentioned here. And just curious to hear, when we talk about decision-making power, I'm wondering, can we envision a future in which these AI systems are fully autonomous, where, say, like for example, Geoff, you were mentioning about agents. Can we have these networks of agents that are literally the only entities that are making the decisions? Or do we still need some sort of last human check before these types of decisions are made? And does it vary, let's say, for very critical decisions made in very critical industries, say for healthcare or defense related, do we still need that last human check before a big decision is made? So does it really depend on the context? And in what situations can you envision, say, where the human participant is still critical, even if we're advancing towards an age where it's mostly just say AI systems making these sort of decisions?
Sure, I certainly can envision a world where the AI agents sort of have the final say. I don't want to. I think there's a lot of places where, people or systems need to be accountable, and I don't believe an agent will be accountable, right? It's sort of like when you use an early ChatGPT, and it's like, how many articles were up, and say 2, or whatever the wrong number is, like it's 2. It was 3, and it's like, oh yeah, oh, oops, you're right, it's wrong. But like that's it. There was no accountability to it. It didn't really learn from that instance. I mean, AI are definitely building better systems to learn from it, but like that specific agent or like model didn't care. And as a result, it can't be accountable for a lot of this. Right? And that's a very small example. There are places where it probably doesn't matter because all data and sort of strong science, or some specific blood indicator saying you probably have some disease. I think I'm okay to let it sort of probably take a lot of accountability for issuing a relevant treatment under certain conditions. There's a lot of abstract scenarios. But things where data is less clear or outcomes are less objectively like good, I am terrified. I don't want an agent to be accountable for my local politics because I don't necessarily agree. And I don't know if there's ever data that will push me towards saying, oh, I definitely want my mayor to be an agent because they know how to run the city. No, I think they know how to run the buses, but not necessarily how to make everyone happy in that city. I think those are two very different things. So I think there will be a lot of other industries, I mean, politics isn't an industry perhaps, but I think there are a lot of areas like this where the data can't be trusted as sort of the absolute source of truth again, as Geoff said, it can say different things at different times, depending on how you analyze it, or what you admit, or what the narrative you want to push. And in those ones, we don't want agents to charge. We don't want AIs to be accountable. You want a human to be accountable so you can at least get that finger pointing ability and say, why did you do this? Did you have some reason you were doing it? And I don't want punishment or revenge, but we can educate better critical thinking into people. Obviously, that will restrict some technical capabilities. People can't process information as quickly. So in other areas, agents make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'll also die on the humanity hill. I think that with AI systems, generally speaking, there's going to be some kind of optimization function. And maybe as they get more and more advanced, that optimization function will also get more complex. But I think you can basically say that an AI is either optimizing for the self-interest of the guy who made it, or for the public interest of some group of people. And both of those groups of people are humans. So I think you ultimately need to either hold, the decisions need to be made, the accountability for the decision needs to be put on humans. And where I see is the risk based on like the current levels of engagement in systems thinking among people is that they just trust that things will work the way that they're advertised to work. They won't accept that there is some probability of failure, there's some chance that things didn't go the way that they did. And they get frustrated when it doesn't happen, but it's like a mental game. And so what worries me is that if we want AI to serve the public interest needs to be held accountable for those AI systems. And I'm not sure that we're ready for that at like a political level. Maybe it's something different than politics, but like a human cooperation, I'm not sure is ready for that kind of accountability.
I think just to mention a few particular things that came to my mind regarding this is, for example, medical decisions or healthcare-related decisions. I think there, having a second pair of eyes by an actual human is super important. Also, like critical infrastructure decisions related to, like, you can optimize, I don't know, the electricity grid and like all those things, but you do need human oversight over that. I mean, we've seen a bunch of movies about this as well going wrong. Like, yeah, electric grid, nuclear stuff. Anyway, so I don't want to go that route, but also I think that maybe something that we don't realize as people using AI is that our roles start shifting from, like, AI can do things that maybe I have done previously, let's say looking at medical results and trying to figure out what the next step should be, like as a doctor. But if AI does all these things and like pre-digests the things for me, then my role changes and like I need to think differently. And I don't think, and this is just one example, I don't think we realize that there is a different role we need to play instead of just lay back and say, hey, this is already done, I don't need to do anything. No, I do, but I need to do something different to make sure that it works the right way.
I kind of love the human optimism over here, but at the same time, I'm aghast that we think that humans are good at running cities. I mean, do we see that? Humans make terrible decisions all the time, like really, really bad decisions. Homelessness, crimes, doctors missing, diagnostics that could save lives, surgeons making mistakes. Humans are really bad at decision making. We're not very good at it. We're not very good at interpreting data. We're very good at non-sequators, where we have a world view of something. So we take data and we put an argument in there that makes no sense at all, just to find an answer that matches our world view. We're really bad at this. And we see it in autonomous cars, right? Humans are crap drivers. You get on the road, you drive around, like you will risk your life most of the time. And yet we're scared about autonomous cars because we want to blame somebody, we want accountability. And accountability is important, but at the same time, reducing bad effects or bad actors and so on is equally important. So I'm not always convinced that there needs to be a human in the loop in a lot of things here, actually. I think if we can get the AI models right, and we can have some sort of checks and understand how they perform and improve them over time, then we already have a bad system. We already have a system that serves the interests of the few. We already have a system where mistakes are made, where problems occur. I don't necessarily buy that means protecting just so we can have a blame if something goes wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not just the checks and the guardrails and the verifiability aspect that's really critical when we're thinking about our AI in the future, but it's also about who's kept accountable. And for most of our panelists here, believe that there should still be a human component that leads the accountability. But as Geoff, you mentioned that, you know, for many years now, since humanity has been here, we've been making a lot of mistakes. We've been making a lot of, say, poor decisions, and we're now questioning, well, if we're moving into this more autonomous age, will these AI, say, agents or systems also be making these sort of non-ideal decisions? So these are all factors to take into consideration. And I appreciate all of the insights that were made by all the panelists here. And thank you guys so much for joining, and thank you for the audience for listening.